Daniel's eyes locked on mine. The kind of look that made my chest tighten, not because it was romantic, but because it was loaded. "Before I tell you," he said slowly, "I need you to promise me you won't tell Rachel until I've figured out what to do." My heartbeat thudded in my ears. This was at the moment where my loyalty to my best friend collided head-on with whatever truth he was holding. I hesitated. "Daniel, you're asking me to keep something from her. You know what you're asking, right?" He nodded once, a sharp, deliberate movement. "I do, and I wouldn't, unless it was serious." His voice dropped lower. "I think Rachel's having an affair." The words slammed into me like a gust of wind. I actually blinked, as if they might change if I looked again. "An affair," I repeated, my voice too loud for the quiet coffee shop. He leaned forward. "I'm not certain, but I've seen enough to suspect." The first cliché began explaining. Little things at first, late nights at work when her office had already closed. Phone calls she took in another room. A new perfume he'd never smelled on her before. I wanted to dismiss it, to tell him it was paranoia. But as he spoke, I realized I'd noticed things too. Subtle, fleeting things I'd brushed off. Rachel canceling plans at the last minute. Her distracted glances at her phone when we were together. The way her smile sometimes didn't reach her eyes. And suddenly, my mind began replaying moments I'd ignored: her disappearing to take a call when we were shopping, the way she'd avoid answering when I casually asked, "Everything okay at home?" Still, I fought it. "Daniel, she's my best friend. She wouldn't." But even as I said it, my voice lacked conviction. The twist, and Daniel did something that made my stomach drop even further. He pulled his phone from his pocket, opened the photo gallery, and slid it across the table to me. On the screen was a blurry picture taken from a distance: Rachel, in a cafe, leaning across a table toward a man who was definitely not Daniel. Her hand rested on his. Her face lit with a smile I'd seen 100 times before, her in-love smile. I stared at it for so long that my tea back at home could have gone cold twice over. "Who is he?" I finally asked. "That's the thing," Daniel said, watching me carefully. I think you know him." My eyes shot up to his. "What are you talking about?" "He's your ex." The words sucked the air out of the room. My ex. The man I'd dated years before. The one I'd cried over in Rachel's kitchen while she poured me wine and told me I deserved better. The man Rachel had sworn she couldn't stand because of the way he treated me. And now, she was with him? The double betrayal. It's one thing to hear your friend might be cheating on her husband. It's another to find out she's cheating with someone who once broke you. A wave of nausea rolled through me, hot and sharp. Daniel kept talking, explaining how he'd followed her once after a work meeting and seen them together. How he hadn't confronted her yet because he wasn't sure how to handle it without destroying everything. But his words were just background noise now. All I could think about was every conversation Rachel and I had ever had about him. How she'd held my hand when I sobbed over the breakup. How she'd looked me in the eye and promised she'd never betray me. And here she was, not only betraying her marriage, but betraying me. The impossible position. Daniel finally stopped talking, waiting for me to say something. I didn't know what to say. If I told him I believed him, It felt like I was betraying Rachel. If I told him I didn't, it felt like I was betraying myself. The walls of the coffee shop felt too close. I wanted air. I wanted to go back to before that phone call, but I couldn't unsee that photo. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice low. "I want the truth," Daniel said. "I want to know if you've seen anything that could confirm this. And I want your help deciding what to do." My hands trembled under the table. I had seen things. I had noticed her secrecy, but saying it out loud would make it real. And once it was real, there was no going back. The choice, here's the thing. About moments like this, they demand a choice, but they don't give you time to weigh the cost. If I helped Daniel, I was crossing a line I could never uncross. If I stayed loyal to Rachel, I was letting him live with suspicion that might be true. And somewhere, in the tangled mess of all this, there was me, the person who'd been blindsided by the fact that my best friend might be sleeping with the man who once broke my heart. I opened my mouth, ready to speak, but the bell over the coffee shop door jingled, and in walked Rachel. The collision spotted us instantly. Her smile faltered just slightly, so slight that most people wouldn't have noticed. But I did. She walked over, her steps slow, calculated. "What's going on here?" Daniel and I exchanged a glance. In that look was the weight of everything unsaid, everything we knew but hadn't confronted. "Just catching up," I said quickly, but my voice was too bright, too rehearsed. Her eyes flicked between us, and for a second, I wondered if she knew exactly what we'd been talking about. The final hook, what happened next, isn't something I can put neatly into words, because it wasn't a single event. It was the start of a chain reaction that would unravel 3 relationships at once. Hers with Daniel, hers with me, and mine with the version of her I thought I knew. And as I sat there, trapped between the man who just shattered my trust in her and the woman who might have shattered his, one thing became terrifyingly clear. I wasn't just a bystander in this story anymore. I was in the middle of it. And the worst part, it was only the beginning. When I hung up with Daniel, my hand stayed on the phone for a long moment, as if holding it tighter would give me answers. It didn't. All it did was make the air around me feel heavier, the silence deeper. What unsettled me most wasn't just the fact that my friend's husband had called, it was how he'd spoken, not in a rush, not in panic, but in a measured, deliberate way that suggested every word was chosen carefully. It was the kind of voice people use when they're carrying a secret they're afraid to let slip too soon. I paced my living room, my mind circling the same questions over and over. Why me? Why now? Why not tell me over the phone? With every step, my thoughts seemed to drift toward darker possibilities. I imagined Rachel in tears, their marriage in trouble, Daniel reaching out to me because he thought I could mediate. That would make sense, but something in his tone didn't match that scenario. He hadn't sounded distressed, he'd sounded intentional. That intentionality bothered me more than I wanted to admit. The weight of loyalty wasn't just any friend. She'd been my confidant since college, the person who'd seen me through heartbreaks, career changes, and all the messy in-betweens. We'd shared countless late-night talks over cheap wine, cried into each other's shoulders, and celebrated every victory, no matter how small. When she married Daniel 5 years ago, I was genuinely happy for her. He seemed solid, reliable, the kind of man who'd never let her down. And over time, I'd accepted him as part of her life. But our connection had always been through her, never on our own. Which is why this call felt like crossing an invisible boundary. Friendships have unspoken rules, and one of them is this: you don't step into the private space between your friend and their spouse, unless absolutely necessary. But Daniel had just pulled me across that line without warning, and now I had to decide: was stepping further in a betrayal? Or was it simply being there when someone needed me? The walk to the meeting, after too much pacing, I finally messaged him. "Where?" The reply came quickly. "The coffee shop on 3rd. Back corner. Half an hour. Half an hour. Just enough time to second-guess every choice that had led me here. The evening air was cool when I stepped outside. The kind of crispness that hinted at rain later in the night. My footsteps echoed against the pavement as I made my way down quiet streets, each one lit by scattered pools of yellow light from old street lamps. I tried to keep my mind blank, but the truth was it was impossible. My thoughts were loud, a whirlwind of half-formed theories. Maybe he'd discovered something about Rachel. Maybe he was planning a surprise for her and needed my help. Or maybe this was something else entirely. That last thought carried a weight I didn't want to examine too closely. The coffee shop. When I pushed open the glass door, the warm scent of espresso hit me. The shop was mostly empty, save for a college student hunched over a laptop and an older man reading a newspaper near the window. Daniel was in the far back, just as he'd said, seated in a booth with his hands wrapped around a mug he didn't seem to be drinking from. His eyes lifted the moment I walked in, and there it was again, that deliberate, searching look. He stood when I approached, offering a faint, almost apologetic smile. "Thanks for coming," he said. I slid into the booth across from him, setting my bag down beside me. "You didn't give me much choice," I said lightly, though my tone carried an edge I couldn't hide. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he leaned back, studying me as though he were still deciding whether to say what he'd brought me here to hear. Finally, he said, "I didn't know who else to talk to." That sentence hung in the air between us, heavy and loaded. The unspoken suspense. It's strange how a simple sentence can shift the entire atmosphere. I didn't know who else to talk to. It suggested isolation, desperation, and maybe, just maybe, trust. But trust about what? "You're starting to worry me," I said. "If Rachel's in trouble, you need to." "This isn't about Rachel," he interrupted, his voice firm but quiet. "Not directly, anyway." That "not directly" snagged my attention like a thorn. It implied that whatever this was, Rachel was connected, but maybe not in the way I expected. Daniel glanced around the coffee shop before leaning forward slightly. "You're her closest friend. You've known her longer than I have. You've seen sides of her that I probably never will. I need you to be honest with me." A strange unease pulled in my stomach. I couldn't tell yet if he was about to share something I'd wish I never heard, or ask me for something I wasn't willing to give. The tension tightens in that moment. I realized we were teetering on a cliff's edge. One step, and the conversation could tumble into territory that would change how I saw my friend, her marriage, and even myself. There's a certain kind of quiet that's not just silence, it's anticipation. The hum of the espresso machine, the faint clink of a spoon against ceramic, the shuffle of the barista moving behind the counter, all of it faded under the weight of his next words. But they didn't come, not yet. Instead, he searched my face, as if trying to gauge how far he could go. I need to know if you're ready to hear something that might complicate things, he said at last. Complicate things. That phrase was like a key turning in a lock I didn't want opened. The pull of curiosity, a part of me screamed to walk away, to tell him this wasn't my place, that whatever it was, it belonged between him and Rachel. But another part, the part that thrives on understanding, on knowing, was leaning in. Because here's the truth. Curiosity doesn't knock politely. It barges in, throws its weight around, and dares you to ignore it. And when the subject is someone you love, a friend you've trusted for years, that curiosity feels almost like duty. So I didn't move. I didn't tell him to stop. I just waited. And in that waiting, I realized something important. Whatever Daniel was about to say, it wasn't just going to affect them. It was going to involve me, too. That's the thing about tension. It's not always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, almost gentle, wrapping itself around you until you don't even notice you're tangled in it. Until it's too late. It started like any other Thursday evening. The sun had already dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of burnt orange and soft violet. I was sitting in my living room, curled up on the sofa with a half-empty cup of tea, scrolling aimlessly through my phone. My day had been long meetings at work, traffic on the way home, and that endless mental to-do list playing in the background of my thoughts. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I wasn't expecting any calls. My parents usually text before they ring, and my closest friends know I don't like phone conversations unless it's urgent. So when my phone suddenly lit up on the coffee table, vibrating against the wood, my first instinct was mild irritation. But then I saw the name. It wasn't my boss. It wasn't my mother. It wasn't one of my girlfriends. It was Daniel. Daniel, my friend Rachel's husband. For a split second, I thought maybe I was imagining it. My brain tried to justify the situation. Maybe Rachel's phone died, and she's using his. Maybe it's about something small like a surprise for her birthday, or some quick question about her favorite dessert. Still, I just stared at the screen. For a moment, my thumb hovering over the green answer button. Because here's the thing, Daniel and I weren't close. Sure, we'd seen each other at dinner parties and barbecues, exchanged polite small talk about the weather or work. But we weren't the type to chat privately. And he had never called me directly before. A part of me hesitated. Picking up this call felt like crossing an invisible line. Not because I thought anything inappropriate would happen, but because, well, in friendships, there are certain boundaries. A friend's spouse usually belongs on the periphery of your life, not in your direct line of contact unless there's a good reason. Still, curiosity and maybe a little concern got the better of me. What if Rachel was in trouble? What if something had happened? I took a deep breath and answered, "Hello." There was a pause. just long enough to make my stomach knot. Then Daniel's voice came through low, calm, but carrying an edge I couldn't quite place. "Hey, it's me." The way he said it felt strange. Not rushed, not urgent. Personal. Like he already knew this wasn't going to be a casual exchange. "Daniel, is everything okay?" I asked, my tone sharper than I intended. Another pause. I could hear him exhale, the faint sound of his breath over the line. "Yeah, everything's fine. I needed to talk to you." I frowned. "About what?" Even as I asked, a part of me was cataloging every possible reason he could have. Maybe Rachel was planning a surprise trip, and he needed my help to distract her. Maybe he was going to ask about her recent mood swings, worried she was upset with him. Maybe, but his voice cut through my thoughts. "Not over the phone. Could we meet?" The words landed heavy. "Meet? Now? At night?" I glanced toward my window, the streetlights outside flickering to life. "Daniel, what's going on? Is Rachel okay?" "She's fine," he said quickly. "It's nothing bad, well, not for her. But I can't explain here. I think you'll understand once we talk." I didn't know what to say. The line between my loyalty to my friend and my sheer human curiosity was blurring fast. My mind was already racing through possibilities. Why couldn't he tell me over the phone? Why me and not someone else? I felt that little prick of unease at the base of my neck, the one that warns you that you're stepping into uncharted territory. Still, I found myself saying, "All right, where?" The moment the word left my mouth, I realized something had shifted. This wasn't just an unexpected phone call anymore. This was the start of something I couldn't predict. And no matter how I tried to convince myself otherwise, I knew life didn't just hand you moments like this without consequences. When I hung up, my tea was cold, and the quiet of my living room suddenly felt suffocating. Daniel's name was still glowing in my recent calls list, almost taunting me. It wasn't just a phone call. It was the first thread in a web I didn't even know I was about to be caught in. From that moment, I knew one thing for sure. This was going to change everything for me, for Rachel, and for Daniel.